I'd like to welcome the panelists and all viewers locally and globally. The ministry shift was set up in response to coronavirus to enable honest reflection on the implications for ministry. And I'm delighted that today the ministry shift is going global in this specially extended edition. I'm Philip Swan, Director of World Mission in this Diocese of Lichfield. Well, today, as we look at the implications for ministry of this global pandemic, it's a great pleasure to introduce 4 participants representing this global dimension. Participants who are already friends of the diocese and indeed have been for many years, from Northern Germany, from South Africa, from Malaysia and Canada. And I'm most grateful that you've agreed to join despite a considerable time zone difference. And I would like to invite you to just say a couple of sentences to introduce yourselves, and also if you could let us know what time it is where you are. So Krista, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Hello from Hamburg in northern Germany. It's 5:30, so nearest to the British time. And I'm from the Lutheran Church in northern Germany.
Welcome. And Matthew?
Thank you, Philip. I'm here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Now the time here is 11:30.
11:30
p.m.
Right. Well, you're looking very bright on it. And
oh,
Cheryl.
I try to keep awake.
Right.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Toff. I am in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, the Diocese of Propel, and it's 9:30 in the morning here.
Right, so you're at the other extreme. Welcome. And Marshall, if you could say a word to just introduce yourself and what time it is where you are, Marshall. Perhaps you're not picking us up, so if you could say a word to us. So in that case, we'll perhaps let Marshall join us a little bit later. Marshall is actually the convener of the diocesan COVID-19 response team in Matlasani Diocese in South Africa. And I think the time is a bit closer to German time. Well, in a time of crisis and uncertainty, it's very easy to look inwards. However, a pandemic is by definition global. And I've gathered that over half the world's population are actually living under some kind of social distancing measure. And it gives us an opportunity to look at this in terms of our own patterns of Christian ministry and to recognize our solidarity, things we've got in common, things that may be different, and to commit ourselves to pressing on and to praying together. So the global ministry shift today is going to have a kind of past element, the initial impact that the coronavirus had on us, a present, what's going on now, and a future in terms of possibilities. So let's cast our minds back, if you are willing, to when you first became aware of coronavirus. I was wondering what you recall, how the things came to you at that point. I think we're in about day 79, so it's quite a long time since lockdown started. Cheryl, I wonder if you'd like to just start the ball rolling on that one.
Well, for us, we were aware that the pandemic was coming, that we were kind of waiting for it to reach our country and reach our province, our area of the country. And for me, one of the pieces of work that we were working on, we have 5 parishes that have made a commitment to merge into one, to become one parish. And we had just set up the team that was going to implement that. And between our first and second meeting, within 2 weeks, we went from being able to meet to having to cancel a meeting because we were kind of ordered home, to stay in our homes, and then having to kind of rethink how we were going to do this piece of work that affects considerable number of the parishes in the immediate area, and having to learn a whole new set of things. And I've been working from home since mid-March. What I call my corner office. It's a corner of my dining room table.
No, well, indeed, no, they're quite a challenge to adjust to these restrictions. I was wondering, Matthew, from your point of view, your recollection of how it all started.
When it started, we thought that it will be something like SARS. It's happened before. Well, the SARS hit us, it is not so serious at that time. So we do not come across any lockdown. So we thought that, well, it will just go very soon. We of course we wash our hands. We have concern that if we have fever, then don't come to church, attending to the church. But then it become worse. To be frank, the church, my church, we are not really prepared for it, especially when the church is going to lock down and we have to go online and digital. I still remember when it locked down, the first few Sundays, first, second, and the third Sunday, to do the recording, the sermon, the inspiration, all has to be done at home. And thank God, with my wife, she's leading praise and worship, inspirations, and son is playing the piano. Then I give the sermon. So this, just three of us, and it lasts for three weeks. So, and at last, some church leaders, like youth, they just push me and say, the pastor, oh, it's enough. They have to come out with something. And they carry on, they take on the role. Well, we share the workload. And now we become more professional.
Yes.
That's what happened to recall.
So quite a steep learning curve, and very good that you had your sort of family unit to form that team in the early days. Krista, would you like to share with us?
Yes, I do not work in a parish, but as a Europe secretary, I coordinate the partnerships to our European partners, and we're in the last planning phase to go to Lithuania with pastors from the Nordkirche and also with Estonian and Latvian pastors. And still 2 weeks before the end of March, we thought we could probably go. And then we found out that we had to go to quarantine for 2 weeks to be there for 1 week. So of course we had to cancel it. And 10 days later, there were no more flights, nor anything. So that was so quickly coming for us. We wouldn't believe it before, really, that it's coming so close. We had never any experience of closing churches on Sundays. We hadn't experienced it even in history, in wars or anywhere. So that was really something. And the first reaction here in our house was, because we had planned in all 150 parishes in our Lutheran church in northern Germany, there's always on the fifth Sunday of Passion Time of Lent, a Judica Sunday on the issue of justice. And our colleague had sent out tons of materials, and parishes were preparing, and now nothing. And then it was good. We said, we want to do something. And so we did an international service in video, and also included a thought of Terry Blanc from the diocese, which was nice. And
excellent. No, well, it's very good to know that those kind of connections are being made, and as you kind of improvised, able to kind of draw on those links, but quite a challenge. Marshall, I wonder if you're receiving us at this point, whether you can contribute. Are you hearing us okay? Like so many people in these times, the technical challenges are considerable, but we can see you very clearly. But be very reassuring if we were able to hear from you. Evidently not. Well, we hope that may somehow work itself out as the session continues. Well, it is incredible to go back those weeks and now months, and it kind of will have hit us at different points, as it were, on the curve, and to just sort of go back into that state almost of disbelief, and of shock, and as Krista says, for the churches to be literally closed was something quite astonishing. Well, in terms of present realities, I was wondering, and we're perhaps already kind of touching on aspects of this, how is it actually affecting current ministry and parish life? And I was wondering if there are any particular issues, any particular examples that you'd like to give to illustrate the present realities. I don't know, anyone particular like to make a start on that? Matthew, could I invite you to set the ball rolling?
The first thing is to reset all the plans. Everything has to postpone, the AGMs, the events, the talk, the workshop, all the gatherings, the trainings in church, we have to replan again. That is the first thing that impacts us. But come to ministry-wise, especially my concern is always towards the elderly. Young people, they can always, they know how to use the, what do you call that, the new technology. They can go online, digital. It's easier for them. But the older generation, that is problem. And then, well, we used to meet every Sunday in church. The relationship is so bonding together. But now we are so near to each other, but yet it's so far away. So that's really, that's an impact.
Yeah. Very big adjustments, particularly for the elderly group you mentioned, to adjust to. Absolutely. No, thank you. Cheryl?
I think one of the things that has been a big adjustment, and that I'm sure people have experienced in other ways as well, is the change for clergy to bring worship. So whether they're trying to live stream, record something, put something on Facebook, the parishes that we're going to merge have worked at recording something that shows different aspects of the home parishes. But the amount of work that is, the learning curve for people who are having to do this, and the amount of time, in addition to the fact that people don't know how much time that is or what it takes, and so some of the expectations about phone calls or different kinds of ways that being kept in touch with parishioners are still there, even with a whole new element of what ministry is. So I think it's been stressful trying to deal with that and with the isolation of operating on our own out of homes. We've tried to counteract that in Zoom calls and other kinds of things, but there's still a kind of a pressure and of just the isolation and learning new things, constantly having to adapt.
Absolutely, and that's a very kind of wearing process, isn't it? And I mean, you mentioned isolation a couple of times, and I picture for a lot of your diocese, there is kind of big spaces. I mean, to what extent were people already kind of quite good on sort of Zoom calling and so on?
We were utilizing it within the diocese, but it was more the exception. Someone couldn't, it might be 4 or 5 hours drive to get to a meeting. So they would Zoom in. But now it's the way we have to do everything. And for people in parishes, that was not the way that they gathered for anything. Because they're used to, as we are, they're used to getting together and having a coffee or a tea and talking about whatever it is. And now we're having to do it. And for some people, that is an almost impossible gap. And some folks don't have internet. They've chosen, they either choose or they don't have it. Reception can be spotty in parts of the diocese. So there's technical challenges as well as emotional challenges of learning.
Indeed. No, well, thank you. Christo, present realities?
Yeah, it's very funny. Our Nordkirche, our Lutheran church in northern Germany, had decided 3.5 years ago, I looked it up again in the General Synod, that one main topic of the next 6 years would be digitalization. But nevertheless, I'd never had a video conference in my life before coronavirus happened. And so there was an enormous impact on this theme. The General Synod decided 3.5 years ago. So in that way, it was quite good. We learned a lot, which is also good for future meetings, because our church is also quite big, not always to go on the train or on the roads, but really have this new way of discussing. So I think it was good for some aspects, really, to being forced to get used to it. But of course, you need to cover the other people in parishes, old people, children, whatever as well. So I like that we tried in our church to go both ways. So we had also introduced the bell ringing together with the Catholic Church every day at noon. There's a bells of hope for 5 minutes that everyone is invited to pray. There are even formulas of praying in the notice boards, in the internet, everywhere. There are bags of hope in a lot of parishes outside the church, cards you can write, cards you can take with you, and these little sorts of things. Or even we had on Monday, Thursday in one parish, a Eucharist takeaway in a way, and it was with a sheet of worship, of text you could use, with a piece of bread, grapes, a candle, and also the possibility of having the sermon and the words of institution on internet, but also otherwise read it if you don't have the possibility. So it's good to have these two ways coming together.
So it sounds as though some very imaginative thinking took place. Admittedly, you were forced into it, but that's really impacting on the wider community. Yeah. And I don't know whether we've any contact yet with Marshall, whether you're picking anything up. It doesn't look like it, but it might be appropriate for me, therefore, just to sort of quote something I picked up from the Archbishop of Cape Town, Thabo Makobi, which was fascinating in terms of the sense of fear and apprehension that many people had about how lockdown would work, but also an intriguing angle really around social distancing, where he said, speaking particularly with reference to John's Gospel about life in all its fullness, that it's never a life lived in isolation. It is communal. It's always about we. And he says in South Africa, many voices in the church prefer not to use the phrase social distancing, but rather to call it physical distancing, and instead to talk about social togetherness. And I think that's a very kind of profound insight, and maybe there are senses in which certainly here within this diocese, within the Church of England, we've talked about it's not business as normal, but it is normal business, and sort of envisaging the church in a sort of fresh way where social connection remains really, really vital. Well, I wonder, there's just in my thinking, I became very aware of how, although the rich and poor alike are affected by coronavirus, and we might think of our Prime Minister, a very privileged person, Boris Johnson, yet became very seriously ill and in intensive care with coronavirus. And we won't make any references to other political stories going on at the moment, though I gather they're all around the world. But I was just wondering if you might think of the particularly vulnerable groups that you're working with at present and what steps you're taking to meet their needs. So, Krista, would you like to start on that?
I would say there are several vulnerable groups, of course, mainly the old people. Those in care homes are especially affected, as they were not allowed for 2 months to have any visits and to take care of those to phone them, or there were music groups in the garden then that they could listen from the balcony, or there were groups who wrote letters to the old people. This is really really difficult situation, that the isolation is even more dangerous sometimes maybe than the coronavirus. But of course there are also very big cases of many people who died in care homes, so we had to be careful. So that is one group. The other one is also the homeless people, who have no place to stay. The newspapers they could sell usually for their issues had to go online, and they didn't have contact. So some provided then hotels. We have Hinz und Kunst, project in Hamburg for homeless people to sell these newspapers. They gathered money to make them stay in hotels. And a third group, leave no one behind. There's a big movement here, and the refugees. And we don't forget the vulnerable people outside of our country, and not
Yes.
that is really a big problem. So also we had a big statement of one of our bishops and the leader of the diaconal services, that this is so important, that is so often forgotten in Europe as well.
Yes, I mean, I think probably we better just pick up headlines at this point, but Matthew, the mention of refugees and migrant workers, presumably that's an important part of your work in Malaysia.
Yeah, to me, in Malaysia, the most vulnerable groups, migrant workers and refugees. Migrant workers because most of them, the hostel or the places that they're staying in is very congested. So it is, well, when we talk about social distancing or physical distancing, it cannot happen, you know, to these people. And I don't know. I have no idea how government is gonna do about this. But then, and I hope that policy will come out soon to figure this out. And of course, on the refugees also the same problem, because the place that they are paying, they have to pay rent for the place they are staying in. And most of these refugees, they are doing like daily wages work. But now in Malaysia, people, many businesses closed down, and even local, they are trying best to get job. So all the job opportunity will not go to refugees. It will take Malaysian as well. So no income for these people.
No, and indeed that does help to keep a real sense of perspective on the issue in a very sobering way. I was just thinking, let's come to the final section where we look to the future. And I wonder, what do you actually take from this experience that might shape the church in a positive, or you might say negative way in the future? Cheryl, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I'd like to comment in a way that picks up on the last one as well. One of the things that we've had has been curtailed in some ways because of the coronavirus is some of the food security or feeding programs that have operated, for example, out of our cathedral, in part because the volunteers are in the demographic that is vulnerable, the older, as in many of our parishes, the older people who are volunteering. And so we have to look at how we're going to do some of the things that we have been doing. If we are relying on a vulnerable population to serve another vulnerable population, the feeding programs deal with people who are kind of close to the street or don't have a living wage. Many of them are indigenous in the city in which I live, First Nations people, not all, but many. And so it's raised the whole issue again about a basic income or a guaranteed income for people, because the social determinants of health are playing out in front of us. And we have to figure out some new ways to do things, and perhaps to enter into a greater advocacy on some of the justice issues that we see are being made manifest.
Thank you. Marshall, I don't know whether you're hearing us. We're seeing a little bit more movement on the screen.
Yeah, I do hear you. It's now that I hear you. I've been struggling all this time.
Yeah. Well, you illustrate the complexities of Zoom, but very well, a warm welcome to you. And I wonder if there's anything that you'd like to particularly add to our discussion. We're just coming to the end of it, but if you wanted to single out a particular issue that was on your mind or on your heart in relation to this panel, say it now.
I heard that you were talking about looking at the future. So should I start there or should I highlight some of the issues?
Okay.
Hello?
Hello, yeah, we're hearing you.
Can you hear me?
We can, keep going.
Okay. I was saying, should I start or should I only answer the question that you are asking?
I think maybe you should just answer this question about the future would be very helpful.
Okay. I think from our previous experiences, we have realized that people have been coming to pay their pledges. And what we need to do in future is to encourage and market the electronic giving, because that is what is working for some of the parishes that we have this time. And the second thing is that we are also moving towards migrating towards using the modern technology and the social media to communicate with people, because that is the best way that has been working in some of the parishes which were able to communicate, and even with the sermons. We still experience the ostracizing of people who are COVID-19 positively tested. So it means we still have to have a lot of education amongst our people and to show them that they are also people of God. And then we also have got to support, to give more support to them and together with their families. So education is very much important in that regard. One other thing that we have realized is that in future, we will need more of the family-centered church. I think the closing down of churches has taught us that we also need to focus more on the family-centered church to make sure that when the church is not, when corporate worship is not on, we can be able to have worship and practice our sacraments in the different homes.
So
the
Marshall,
last one here,
yeah.
Yes.
Very briefly.
No. I was saying this is the last point.
No, that's the last one. Perfect timing. Thank you. I'm so thankful that you were able to join us and be with us and make such a very helpful contribution in this way. And there's a lot more that we all could add to this, and it's rather frustrating having the constraints of time. But thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Marshall. And particularly to those who are watching and those who are supporting and connected with our panelists. The next edition of the Ministry Shift will be focusing on discipleship, and it takes place at the usual time next Monday at 4:30, which is 9:30 a.m. in Saskatchewan and nearly midnight in Malaysia. Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.